Far Cry 3, an open world first-person shooter sandbox from Ubisoft released near the end of 2012, offering a huge amount of freedom in exploration, an excellent story campaign, unique side quests, heaps of map markers, and a pretty decent skill tree. This game is definitely a very hefty package for those willing to give it a try today. The amount of things you can actually do in this game is pretty crazy. It's basically like going on a holiday to a tropical island somewhere in the Pacific. For example, you can get a tattoo, go for a hike, go hunting, maybe meet the locals. You can go for a drive, try hang gliding, meet some more locals, do some more hunting. Okay, in all seriousness, the game feels solid even today, and the story is definitely a highlight, both in terms of the overall narrative and the unique characters it introduces. It actually feels like it's been so long since I've had a really interesting villain, and Vaas just embodies that from minute one. I actually was always just looking forward to when he would show up again in the story. I mean, from the start I was instantly drawn in, but as soon as I was given access to the world map, I felt like I was hit with a sense of dread. After years of playing empty, boring open world games filled with meaningless busy work and fetch quests, I thought this was your typical formulaic Ubisoft title and was pretty apprehensive about burnout. When I began, I also thought the graphics were very average considering the release date, but after spending much more time seeing the size of the world and understanding the mechanics, I realised they actually did very well. Far Cry 3 has also got to be, for me at least, one of the only games that is brave enough with its use of colours. I mean, look at these shots. The shades and vibrance in so many sequences is very impressive, and to me shows what was possible for so many older games, especially those in the so-called piss filter age of gaming. And it doesn't stop there. Check out the music in this story mission. Like, that one sequence meant I was definitely going to see this game through to the end, open world or otherwise. Now, moving on to sound design, I think they did an okay job, but not great. I wouldn't say it's the best personally, because I kept thinking I could hear cars honking as they drove past, but it was just notifying me enemies were around like this. The sound for the rest of the game was decent, just this one thing really annoyed me. Considering this is now a decade-old game, I should mention the few glitches that still exist, like an enemy being stuck in a rock, a dead guy that's not really dead, and a dead guy that lets me open up the shop menu. Oh, and don't forget these guys that levitate. All in all, the game was pretty bug-free, and for an open world game I would definitely expect to see at least some bugs like this, and it was pretty entertaining. One thing that did annoy me though was the looting mechanics. Like, whenever you killed enemies and their weapons dropped nearby, it was just frustrating trying to loot without changing weapons every 2 seconds, but it's really more nitpicking than any real complaint, I guess. The one proper complaint I have isn't about the game itself, but rather the Ubisoft Connect launcher, which for some goddamn reason is needed even though I actually own the game both on Steam and Ubisoft. I understand the bigger companies wanting their own titles on their own launches, but when I own this game on Steam and you force me to log in every time I try to play the game, it makes me hate your company more, not less. For example, starting up the game each time forces me to open Ubisoft Connect. Okay, fine, Rockstar, Origin and other companies do it, and I wouldn't even have mentioned it if it wasn't so broken. I own Red Dead Redemption 2 on Steam, and yes, it logs me into the launcher, but it doesn't hinder my ability to play the game. Now, after finally logging in, it bugs out and re-asks for my password details each time I try to play. Then, for some reason, it forces Windows to ask me for the permissions every time I try to launch. After accepting, it gives me this screen with 2 Far Cry 3 options to play, and some white fucking text that I can't even read. I'm assuming because I own the game on Ubisoft Connect and Steam, it wants me to pick which one to launch, but it gives me nothing to indicate which is which. Then when I select the correct one and it finally launches, it almost always starts in windowed mode, even though I've set it to full screen in my previous playthroughs. I mean, even when I found a YouTube clip that shows you how to edit the registry file, it still doesn't work, so I just basically play it as is. Sorry, rant over. Anyways, moving on, the story, sound, and graphics aside, I did find myself constantly wanting to go back to the side quests, and the inner completionist just wanted to tick off all the markers on the map, which are right there from the start. The sandbox style exploration and side quests probably isn't for everyone, and especially anyone that really likes their linear story games, and that's normally me most of the time, but I think the variety of ways in which you can approach each of the map markers ensures enough variety to keep you engaged throughout. I mean, that open world fatigue definitely started to sink in for me, but I honestly was not as burnt out as I was on some other modern games like Hogwarts Legacy for example, and I do like to complete as much as I can generally. After finishing all the side quests, clearing all the camps and doing a bunch of the challenges, I realized my fears were for the most part unfounded. This game still has a substantial amount of hours if you plan to complete everything, but I managed to finish every single side quest, and from what I can tell there aren't actually any duplicates, and each one had enough to it to be unique in both story, length and gameplay, which for Ubisoft today is pretty surprising. One thing I will say that surprised me is that Far Cry 3 to me manages to feel very lived in. There's constantly random encounters, frequent conflict between the Rakyat and Vaas pirates, random locals, the privateers, and the multitude of animals roaming around, which can be a proper threat if you're not careful. Some of the more interesting aspects of the open world though include the fire mechanics and these water graphics, and the rain, and the view. There is absolutely a huge amount to do and explore on this tropical island, but the mechanics, vehicles, enemies, skills, weapons, challenges and gameplay actually means you have a tremendous amount of variety in your approach to each of the points of interest, and the beauty of having a super engaging story means you have the choice of doing it all at your own pace. Getting back to the story in this game, it really has to be one of the best I've ever experienced, and the amount of detail and references scattered throughout the random story missions and side quests shows that the people who worked on this game really cared and knew their audience. In my opinion, the balance of everything was done just right, and as long as you're comfortable with slightly older graphics and a pretty large open world, I think most people will have a very enjoyable 20 to 30 hours, and probably a lot more if you're the completionist type. I definitely recommend Far Cry 3 in 2023.